Hello, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining yet another technical drop-in session hosted by Veritas. As you can see, as you can see, our objective today is to um, just give me a second. I think we're having an echo at our end. All right. So, all right, and the echo is gone. Awesome. All right. So, thank you all again for joining in for the mission critical workloads and container session this afternoon. So we have Kunal Panchal, who is our solutions architect from Singapore, joining us today. Kunal is our subject matter expert in application availability as well as storage ecosystem from Veritas. So Kunal is joining us from Singapore. I have Philip with me. Philip is our solutions architect based here in Sydney. And I'm your host based here in Melbourne. Now, interesting enough, it's been a rainy few days here in Melbourne, but today the sunlight has come through. So I'm quite happy to say that I've just risen over the clouds as you see in the picture. But thank you again for joining us. I am now going to kick off. So as we go along, I appreciate you bringing in your questions on the Q&A tab. The question and answers will make this session interactive. We would want you to ask us as many questions as you'd like in the Q&A session, and Phil will help us moderate those questions as well as interesting questions, or rather the best question for today is going to get a $25 Amazon voucher. So we will, after the session, we will have a quick round of the list of questions that come through, and the best one, whoever has asked us the best one, we will reach out to that lucky individual, and we will hand over the $25 voucher. So keep the questions coming. There is no silly question. There is no difficult question. All questions are the same. Bring them on, and as much as we would like, we will try to answer all the questions during this session. But in case if you're not able to do that, we may have to reach out to you separately. But let's make this an interactive one. Brilliant. So as I get in, I would want to actually start with a quick poll, and that's probably for us here in Australia. It's just past lunchtime, so I just hope people don't doze off. But we are going to start with a poll, and just gives us a very high level dynamics of who's attending and what life cycle stage are you in with container adoption. So the poll here is, what is the state of adoption for containers or Kubernetes in your organization? Are you already using it in production? Is it under evaluation? Or are you not looking at building containers as part of your production environment? So, this is just going to give me a quick view of how we are stacked in terms of the audience today. I'm going to give another 10 seconds for people to key in, and it's probably something that will also help us take the conversation during today. So with that said, I think we've got about 25-30 seconds for the poll. So let me just close the poll here. Thank you, Trudy, for closing the poll. And shortly we'll have the messages. Okay, brilliant. So I've got about 50% looking at evaluating it. So that's a very good news. And we already have 17% of our attendees in production. So the a net of 67% audience keen on containers or already are on containers. Of course, the 33% is something which may not be relevant at this point, but as we go along, we should be all right. So that's a good dynamic, and I'm sure Kunal and Phil will be happy at looking at the split here. So as I go on, I would actually want to do a little bit of basic foundational understanding of how containers came into existence and why we really talk about containers these days. So as we evolved from physical machines and server architectures, and we transitioned into virtualization, and virtualization was one element where the compute and the storage was abstracted, and the applications got their own ecosystem in the shape and form of virtual machines. Now, that technology probably back in 2005, 2006 was the best level of abstraction that somebody could get. But of course, virtualization has its own challenges, the noisy neighbor challenge and all the other challenges around resource sharing and contention had its head popping up as the enterprise applications moved into virtualization. So that evolved, that led to, a transition into the technology, and it was an automatic transition where containerization could potentially give a benefit in terms of all these challenges on virtualization. So essentially, what containers bring to the table is an ability to, run absolutely segregated modules of workloads. And I always like the analogy that is used in the world of containers of cattle and pet. Now, I'm probably going to spend about 1 minute on that, where, consider your physical servers or your virtual machines being your pets. As in our real life, pets are something which is close to our heart. We take care of the pets significantly more than, any other thing in our house, and we love our pets. It takes care, it takes nurturing to bring the pets up and make the pets, sustain. It needs a lot of love and care. Now, if something happens to the pet, of course, the whole family is worried. Now, that's where I'm going to go back to the analogy. If something really happens to my server, and if my server is running a mail server, or if my node is running a business critical application, and if something bad happens to the application, the entire business is affected, just like our pet. Now, as the container world refers to it, it's always good to be moving out of the pet mindset, and let's try to get to the cattle mindset. Now, the cattle mindset is basically, instead of bottlenecking everything into a single virtual machine, why not spread it across multiple cows or multiple buffaloes? Those are the ones that are actually going to scale out and, continue to deliver value to your business. If something happens to one of those, cattle, or a group of cattle there, it's always a very quick and easy way of, relying on the remaining of those. So that's where containers bring in that value. So the stateless containers, as we always look at, an ability to spinning up your workload as and when needed, and move those containers from one data center or one ecosystem into the other, is what the cattle bring in. And that's probably the simplest way I can explain my 10-year-old son on what containers really bring to the table. Now, it's easy if I just compare all of that together. I'm now considering, cattle versus pets, and that's what containers bring on the table. Now, because it's scale out and easily instantiated as part of the entire ecosystem, running DevOps operations make it absolutely, cakewalk. So I can script a template which brings up a container. It can bring up an application which is running inside the container, and as I can spin up as many containers as possible, or pods, as we also talk about, in that particular ecosystem, and, run it based on my DevOps schedule. So that makes it very easy. Now, most of your cloud native applications, which are designed over scale out, could be Netflix, could be any other streaming platform that you use, are predominantly based on containers. Now, that's the beauty of containers, where I can automate and have a quick, deployment life cycle and make everything go together as part of the ecosystem. And, if I look at this is not something which is novel. This is not something which is a science project. Gartner predicts 75% of global organizations will really move to containers by 2022. That's not too far away, and it's from a total market cap point of view, we are actually talking about a $2.7 billion aggregated revenue, and this is US $2.7 billion by the end of 2021. So, it looks like a significant growth market for the infrastructure as a service, or hybrid infrastructure model. So with that said, I'm going to keep moving and take it to one step further. Now, the reason when, or even the fact that Gartner is predicting 75% of global organizations taking up containers, that also means that we will have enterprise applications move into containers. Until now, or probably until recent times, you would see stateless applications being a part of the cattle. So I have a web server. The web server, it needs to be scalable based on how many users are logged in. So I just containerize my web server or the web service application, and then spin up as many instances of that container based on my load and request demand. But then now, moving from that stateless architecture into a stateful architecture, where enterprise applications like, it could be your payroll system, it could be your sales opportunity management systems, which rely on databases. The databases rely on persistent storage, is going to be a predominant use case. And today we'll talk about how enterprise applications can be run under the containerized world without really compromising on performance and storage persistence. So that's where we're going to focus on today. So as we move along, and maybe I've touched upon all of this to an extent, but I'll still, bring it a little further from a container architecture point of view, right? A container simply is defined as a standard unit of software standard unit of software packages that come together with all its dependencies. And the container has the application, it has the runtime, and perhaps a little bit of operating system dependencies that the application might need, all bundled together in a single pod. Now, essentially, this container or this pod is going to isolate applications from each other, and then I can host these containers on the actual physical system without really having a direct dependency on the host OS. So it makes it very easy for the applications to move between the environments. Now, I can actually spin up containers for dev test. I can spin up containers for my DR purpose. And it just makes it so portable because the dependency or the hard dependency between the underlying infrastructure and the application is now cut off. Now, again, security is also a part of the container, and the runtime that is provided to the container generally will take care of the security as well as all the data visibility or data exposure measures are taken care of. So essentially, container gives you that unit of operations. Now, what Kubernetes is, and Kubernetes is basically an orchestration platform. It's an orchestration system, which is an open source orchestration system, supports predominantly the major container platforms like the Dockers or the other leading container platforms. And Kubernetes actually brings in the orchestration in there. So the orchestration, what do you mean by orchestration? It's clearly going into the path of how can I quickly automate the deployment of my containers? How can I quickly scale up the container life cycle based on the demand? So Kubernetes brings in all of the orchestration and abstraction that is needed in terms of the life cycle management of containers. Now that's where the fundamentals are, and I'm taking it one step further by going into what are the features that any container platform. Now, if I look at Docker, for example, the key application or container benefits that it can bring in is isolation. The most important part is isolation and the independence between the platform that is hosting the container and the application. So that is the key win here for container. In virtual machines, you are tightly coupled. In containers, you are loosely coupled. So it makes it fairly lightweight, consistent module that can move from one side to the other or one hosting environment to the other, and without really causing any impact to the application. So the application that runs within the containers can still be moving transparently. Now, putting that together with Kubernetes being an orchestration platform, encapsulates the movement and the mobility of the container into a much more structured manner. So it gives you an ability to intelligently or smartly scheduling which container is hosted where. So this could be based on performance, this could be based on health of the underlying infrastructure, or it could also be based on the load that is coming through. So, all the key features of Kubernetes come in terms of orchestrating the container. So I think that's pretty much a lot of basic fundamentals. Now, I think at this point, we should, take it one step further and see who's playing in this market. I mean, if I'm saying that Gartner expects 75% enterprise organizations to adopt containers, I mean, there has to be a lot of competition in this space, and it's absolutely true. So if you look at this quadrant, it's coming from the Forrester Wave back in Q3 2020, and you can see that there are absolutely the key infrastructure providers. If you look at Red Hat, you look at Google, you look at VMware, all of these people have their own container platforms, and the container platforms are essentially giving the transition or transformation ability from running through a virtual machine into the container ecosystem and reap the benefits that we've just spoken about. So Red Hat, with their OpenShift platform, is currently leading the market. But of course, the Kubernetes that is provided also over Google, and I'm sure the big cloud providers are also bringing in their own container orchestration platforms, which bring a lot of options on the table. So with that said, I'm going to probably do a quick pause here and take another poll, and make sure that we have alignment into what we've been seeing so far. So the poll here is, what is the top technical challenge in your container or Kubernetes adoption? Now, this is again for the 67% of the respondents that had given us a positive response on the containers. I'm sure there are some who've gone through these challenges, and I'm also hoping that some of the attendees have explored or thought about some challenges. So looking at these three challenges, is it security and compliance that has been your primary challenge for your container adoption? Is it storage capabilities, or is it your ability to understand a new technology, or the skill set that is available to manage and maintain the platform? So I'm going to give another 5 seconds and wait for a response here. So that should be good. Trudy, if we could just look at what the results come through. That looks an even spread. So skill set is definitely a challenge, and security and compliance also is a challenge. So I think that's a good split. There are storage capabilities that have been a challenge for some people as well. So it's good, and Kunal and Philip, as we go along and dive deeper, we'll probably also want to we will address these 2 or 3 challenges as we go along. All right, so as we move on, I'm going to now switch gears and move into InfoScale and containers together. So as you would know, InfoScale is the Veritas suite of products that bring in high availability and disaster recovery, as well as storage management for our enterprise grade applications. Now, this is where your tier 1 revenue generating applications are at risk, and when your applications need a way of high availability or disaster recovery or even performance storage ecosystem, this is where InfoScale starts adding value. So InfoScale gives you a platform independent, vendor independent, high availability disaster recovery and storage management solution that can help you run your applications across any platform and hardware or cloud of your choice. So what does really InfoScale make containers, or what does InfoScale bring to containers? Now I'm going to start with very high 10,000 foot view here, where in simple words, InfoScale makes containers and Kubernetes enterprise ready. Now, when I'm saying enterprise ready, and enterprises are really going to be focused on stateful applications, which are essentially their revenue generating applications. Stateless applications, yes, it makes sense for the brand where I don't want my website to go down, or I don't want my website to be laggy. That's the front end. So stateless applications like websites is perfect, but the back end of that particular website is where your enterprise level application would sit. That's where your business logic is. And what InfoScale brings to the table is an ability to make that application running inside a container app, enterprise ready. What that really means is I'm going to take it one step further and bring it to the 100-foot view. So what InfoScale brings in this world of containers is an enterprise grade storage service. This enterprise grade storage service is basically a service that provides persistent storage for your containers. Now, the beauty of this is when I'm talking about tier one stateful applications, every application will need a persistent block storage that is reliable, and no matter where you move from one ecosystem to the other or one data center to the other, I still want the data persistency and the consistency in there, so that no matter which container or which application running in the container request for data, everybody should see the same picture. That's the beauty of persistent storage. And Kunal is going to deep dive into how that is achieved as we go along. But essentially, that's the value that InfoScale brings in. Now, furthermore, as you're talking about hybrid environments or hybrid cloud environments, even public cloud environments, this is where performance matters. Now, because we are talking about hundreds and thousands of containers looking for data set from a particular storage, it is important for us to have a responsive return of IOs. Now, that's where performance and containers generally have a challenge, because the number of multiple in parallel requests that go into your data set come in, it's always a challenge to the underlying hardware to respond in the same performant manner. So that's where InfoScale brings in the layer of performance and quality of service in the world of containers. Now, the beauty again is, because we are being or because InfoScale is a platform independent solution, we can also look at taking your SAN fabric or the SAN layer and simplify it further, and that makes it even more software defined storage management, much more palatable in the world of containers. And again, as we go further today, we will have a deep dive into how that can be done. And as I said, data integrity is the key. You need to have a single source of truth across hundreds and thousands of containers, which is what InfoScale brings in. And there are a few more other advantages that I'm going to, let Kunal talk about as we move along. So with that said, I am going to quickly, summarize on what are the top two benefits of InfoScale for containers. Purely, as we've said, stateful applications need reliable storage ecosystem. Reliable and persistent storage ecosystem is what InfoScale brings on the table. And, enterprise grade storage management, which is 100% software defined, is what comes in with InfoScale and storage. And it gives you the flexibility to choose your underlying infrastructure. It could be your SAN based, or it could be your direct attached storage within the environment. It could be, if you decide to run it on a hybrid environment, that can be done too. Or if you want it to be a fully public cloud environment, you can run containers on the public cloud environment as well. And with that, coupled with operational efficiency, is how we bring the benefits over to the table. So before I actually hand over to Kunal to get into the details of how we've achieved this, I'm going to quickly check with Phil if there are any questions, any question that stands out and we want to discuss until this point. Phil?
Yeah, questions coming through. There's one, I'll say an early question that came up. I think Kunal answered, but I think there's a common theme. It says the question is, how does protection and recovery work in a secure multi-tenanted Kubernetes cluster? So Kunal provided an answer, but yeah, maybe something that we can take up later as well. Protection and recovery in a secure multi-tenanted Kubernetes.
Yes, absolutely, and that's a great question. If Kunal, you are going to cover that response as part of your slides, then we'll probably take the question as we go, or otherwise happy to take the answer right now.
Yeah, Amit, we will be taking up that question as we move into this session.
Brilliant. Sounds good. So thanks, Phil and Kunal. I'll hand it over to you now.
All right, thank you, Amit. So good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. While Kubernetes adoption is increasing, many, if not most enterprises and IT shops are just looking to get their feet wet, as we saw in the poll. In this brave world of Kubernetes, there are challenges. So even before developers can begin to do their work on a new platform, the admins and the operations team, or as they like to call it, DevOps team, they must lay the groundwork to add traditional yet very vital data management components to this mix. And the most critical that we often hear about in our customer interaction is persistent storage. Persistent storage is a good example of a necessary component in a Kubernetes deployment. So Amit gave a 10,000 feet view, even 1,000 feet view. What I'm really going to do is give you a 1 feet view, and hopefully it will address all of the questions that were raised. And if there are more questions, we are very happy to take. So let's move on and get a 1 feet view of what InfoScale does for containers, right? So with Veritas InfoScale, we are trying to solve 3 key challenges, which we often hear from our large enterprise customers, especially for bringing in business critical or mission critical applications on container environments. And the 3 challenges we often hear are: number 1, lack of data management capabilities and storage tools. Number 2, application performance slowdowns, especially for databases and other tier 1 applications. And finally, third, lack of ways to deal with applications such as RDBMS that requires strong data persistence with added protection capabilities, protection as well as recovery capabilities. So to start with, let's understand a term called Container Storage Interface, or what we call as CSI. The CSI is a standard for exposing arbitrary block and file storage systems to containerized workloads on a container orchestration system like Kubernetes. Using CSIs, third-party storage vendors, one of them is Veritas, can write and deploy plugins exposing new storage systems in Kubernetes without ever having to touch the core Kubernetes code. And that's precisely what we are doing. So with Veritas InfoScale's CSI driver, which we have written, customers get advanced storage management capabilities for deploying business critical tier 1 workloads in containers. Example can be a software defined persistent storage volume with quality of service capabilities for consistent performance and availability of workloads. Customers also ask for a solution which is non-disruptive for scaling of volumes, because containers can come online in hundreds and they can go down in hundreds. So it's not a typical virtual machine where it goes through a cycle of provisioning and hardening and then coming online. Containers come online and offline in matter of a few hours. So the underlying storage system should support that scaling in a non-disruptive way. And we also have strong data integrity capabilities to avoid IO corruption. Because there was a question on protection, I will go into more details what we mean by strong data integrity. And last but not the least, we help customers accelerate their DevOps initiatives by providing rapid point-in-time copies of their production data using our CSI driver. So let's move on to the next slide and understand a bit more detail. So this kind of provides a more 1 feet view into what exactly we are doing when it comes to persistent storage for containers. Almost 7 out of 10 customers that I have spoken to in the last 2 or 3 months, they have accelerated their efforts in adopting containers. And they tell me that one of the key challenges the architects are looking for is having x86 server nodes with direct attached storage as the preferred hardware model for Kubernetes clusters. I think there was a question from the audience where does Veritas support SAN attached storage or direct attached storage? The answer is yes, we support both. In fact, as I said, 70% of the customers I speak to, they prefer a direct attached storage model where they can scale as their requirement grows. But the challenge in direct attached storage is to present a shared persistent storage to container pods. So with Veritas InfoScale, we provide ability to our customers where they can pool these direct attached storage resources from individual nodes in a Kubernetes cluster and present it as a single shared resource among multiple pods. So the software driver, which is based on an open standard like CSI, it runs on every node in the cluster. And from there on, customers can provision persistent volumes that are highly available to different application pods. There are various storage classes depending on the application needs. So we understand there is a need for flexibility. You cannot have a rigid solution because every application requires a slightly different storage resource. Either it is performance optimized or capacity optimized. So for example, the software allows you to have two built-in storage classes. You can have large capacity volume with encryption, or you can have high performance volume with resiliency, like 2 copies of data or a mirrored copy of data. You can, of course, mix and match. If you want high performance with encryption, we allow you to do that. Everything is based on a YAML file where you describe your requirements, and then we will be provisioning storage volumes accordingly. So let's move on and understand some additional storage management features which are built. So it's not just about data persistence. There are requirements from our customers for additional enterprise grade storage services. And if not 7, I think I was speaking to this large bank out of Singapore who is trying to take one of their e-payments application into container environment. And they said, you know, every hardware vendor gives me persistent storage capabilities, but what I'm really looking for is other advanced services. What about encryption? What about data optimization? What about disaster recovery and stuff like that? So the software solution from Veritas is flexible enough to support both SAN attached, which can be over fiber channel or iSCSI, and even direct attached, which can be an internal SSD or just a spinning hard disk. And as I said, we understand that when you run mission critical application on containers, just like any other infrastructure platform, there is need for enterprise storage services. So the persistent volume capabilities of Veritas InfoScale comes with host of storage services out of the box. One is, for example, I can share at least 3 or 4 with you, and in the interest of time, the first one is storage classes. So there are built-in storage classes like fault performance, fault tolerance, performance optimization for preventing unplanned downtime, and getting a consistent application experience to the end users, no matter what infrastructure you're running on. Second is support for securing your data at rest. So it has built-in passphrase-based encryption or even support for third-party key management services as well. The third is around data optimization, where we create space-optimized point-in-time copies which can accelerate your DevOps initiatives, and you can instantaneously provision copies of your primary data for secondary operations like analytics, reporting, modeling, testing, development, etc. And last but not the least, something which almost all finance and telco customers are asking us is, we'll be coming up with a built-in block-level software replication solution for disaster recovery of stateful data. This is very important and one of the most requested feature that we get in, but we wanted to get it production ready. So it will be available later in this FY. And yes, there will be support for synchronous as well as asynchronous mode of replication over a geo distance or a long distance for your data center. Okay, so let's move on and try to understand a little bit more. What do we do when it comes to sharing of persistent volumes? So when you share a block storage device between pods, in a traditional world also, if you do a data sharing or sharing of a disk between multiple servers, there is a need for different options of sharing depending on the application requirements, because you don't want to have somebody accidentally writing data, or you want to have added protection, etc. So for data sharing, we have 3 modes where you can share the persistent volume. The first one is a very standard read-write only mode. In this mode, you create a volume and you mount it in a read-write mode on one node. Okay, that's pretty standard and it suffices for most of the applications. But there are additional applications, like to cater those applications, we have additional 2 modes. The second is read-write on many nodes. So for example, if you are taking parallel applications like analytics, maybe you want to take a SaaS-based workload into containers, or you are running something like TIBCO or WebSphere or MQ, where the requirement is to have parallel read-write or a parallel IO from multiple containers in different pods, you can choose this node. You can choose this mode, read-write many nodes. And finally, what we also understand is there are requirements in large enterprises where you need write capabilities from one node, but read only on many nodes. So this is a requirement when you want to protect the storage volumes from accidental writes by someone or some application from another pod. So you just need a read-only access in real time across multiple nodes, but you want to have only one privileged node doing all the writes. So in that case, you can choose ROX mode. So that's why we have 3 modes of data sharing: read-write only on one node, read-write on many nodes, read only on multiple nodes, but write on one node. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So moving on, the next point I wanted to touch upon is the need for strong data integrity, something which our existing InfoScale customers absolutely swear by. So InfoScale is currently being used in top 10 telcos, finance institutes, healthcare organizations, even public sector. You can name it, and we have them on our customer list. So when it comes to data integrity, the key to protecting data in a shared storage cluster environment is to guarantee that there is always a single consistent view of cluster membership. Because Kubernetes is just another platform, right? There are issues like cluster arbitration, hardware failures, etc. So when it comes to data integrity, when one or more systems stop sending heartbeats, the software must determine which systems can continue to participate in a cluster membership and how to handle the other systems which are still alive and keep the faulted system isolated. So there has to be intelligence in the underlying software. So when there is a hardware failure, you can click into in a Kubernetes cluster, we ensure data integrity and avoid IO corruption. So we use a mechanism called IO fencing to guarantee data protection. And we use something which is industry standard called SCSI tree persistent group reservations to fence out data drives and prevent accidental loss in a split brain condition. These reservations are, as I said, industry standard, and they are triggered by the operating system itself, which we have hooked into, and we will fence off the faulted node, ensuring the alive nodes are healthy and continue the IO on those active nodes. So fencing also ensures data protection, which is a key concern. In fact, it's the highest priority concern for mission critical workloads. And thus we stop running systems when necessary to ensure that these systems don't accidentally start a service if they are faulted, right? For non-shared storage, yes, we use a mechanism called majority-based fencing. So it's not SCSI PGR. So thus we ensure a faulty node will never commit IO to the underlying block storage. Only the healthy nodes will be committing the IO. All right. I hope that gives you a peek into the data integrity capabilities of the software. Let's move on and understand what we do to accelerate DevOps. Now, to start with, let's have a common understanding of DevOps, because it's the most hyped word in today's IT environment. So DevOps is nothing but a combination of a developer role and an operations role. In the traditional IT environment, there were two roles. Developers has no understanding of what operations guy do, and operations has nothing to do with what the developer is writing. But DevOps today is basically a combination of cultural philosophies or practices and tools that increases organizations' ability to deliver applications and services at high velocity, right? DevOps is sort of different than the traditional software development and infrastructure management processes. This idea or this tooling of processes with DevOps, it enables organization to better serve customers and compete more effectively in the market. So in my experience, when I talked to many DevOps guys, they said, I don't want to understand how the underlying storage system works. I don't want to have any experience on or expertise on Veritas software or any third-party capabilities. I just want to write my code. I want to create point-in-time copies and quickly get software out to the market. So there is a strong need to create fast point-in-time copies of primary data by developers without any understanding of the underlying storage system. So we don't want them to be expert at handling Veritas or any third-party solution that they are using. The job of developers is to just have access to point-in-time copies. So what Veritas InfoScale provides is out-of-box REST APIs, which developers can leverage to create instantaneous point-in-time copies. These APIs are, as I said, REST-based. You just need HTTP calls into these APIs, and underlying Veritas will handle the complex processes of freezing the IO or freezing the disk, creating a consistent point-in-time copy, provisioning it, etc., etc. So based on the requirement, developers can either create a full copy, which is 100% like-to-like copy, or a space-optimized copy, which is typically, in our experience, 10% of your production storage. So if your production volume is, let's say, 10 GB, when you create a space-optimized copy, it is just 1 GB, but it is fully read and writable, right? These can then be consumed by your secondary workloads like testing, development, reporting, and other analytics requirement. Okay, so that's how we accelerate DevOps. I already spoke about data integrity. Let's move on, and I finally can summarize the key capabilities of Veritas InfoScale solution for Kubernetes environment. So there are three key takeaways when it comes to Veritas solution for containers and Kubernetes environments. First one is SLA-based persistent storage. Right. Based on your needs, based on your workloads, you can choose a storage class from the CSI driver to either provision a capacity optimized storage volume or IO optimized storage volume for high performance workloads, right? These storage classes are built in, they are 100% software driven. You can choose your choice of infrastructure. Second is lowering operational expenditure. At least 5 customers I have spoken to in last 2 months, they are telling me that, yes, we want to go into a hyper-converged direct attached storage model, but to kick the tires, to ensure that I am utilizing my existing investments wisely, we want to repurpose our existing storage resources, which are SAN attached, for persistent storage needs for our containers. So that's why with Veritas software, we support both SAN attached over FC or iSCSI or direct attached architectures. There is no difference in the capabilities and the experience to the developers and the applications. And last but not the least, with features like support for strong data integrity and protection, we can accelerate the initiative of bringing more enterprise critical workload to Kubernetes. With data integrity, we ensure that there is absolutely no IO corruption or block level corruption in event of hardware failure or storage failure, etc. And there is also a built-in protection for strong data. There is built-in strong protection for data corruption, especially when you are talking about things like cluster split brain and cluster arbitration. All right. So that's a quick summary. Moving on, this is probably my last slide. If you need more information on what we shared today, or even trialware licenses, in case you want to download the software and kick the tires in your environment, you can visit our website URL, which is displayed there. You don't need to note it down because I'm sure you would be receiving a copy of the slides we presented today. Or alternatively, which is way easier and more productive, you can reach out to our local Veritas team of sales and pre-sales, and we'll be happy to go into more details around these capabilities. So I hope it was a good use of your time. I would like to thank you all for your time today, and it provided a peek into what we can do when it comes to Kubernetes. You want more details, as I said, there are various options. So at this time, I'd like to thank you once again, but I would hand it back to Amit for taking up any Q&A that came along. Amit, back to you.
Thanks, Kunal. Great job. And as Kunal said, team and attendees, if you have a question and if you haven't posted the question in the Q&A, here is the email address that you can reach out to us. It's asr.team@veritas.com. We will aspire to get back to you very quickly on your response. If there is a discussion or a follow-up that you would like our team to come back to you, we will arrange for our local representatives to reach out to you in your country and your cities. Most likely, given the state we are in, it would end up in a remote conversation, but we are happy to have that follow-up. So with that said, I think we have about 10 odd minutes to look at the question and answers. Phil, was there any question that stands out and you would like to cover?
Yeah, so a number of questions came up regarding backup, although our topic was not really we were going after backup today. There's a lot of I think in terms of protection, Kunal talked about how we protect the storage systems from from data corruption and stuff like that. That is when the workload is online. But I think a number of questions were related to data protection. And what I'll say is that Veritas or NetBackup was the first product that was officially certified by Docker for data protection on Docker-based environments. Now, this dates back to 2019 when that happened. So NetBackup has had capabilities related to backup and recovery of Docker containerized deployments. And latest is now we've added a lot of capabilities for OpenStack deployments as well. So the OpenStack deployment enhancements were added to NetBackup in a March 2021 update. And there's lots of capabilities related to how NetBackup works with Kubernetes environments that are due with the next update we will bring in mid-year. In fact, I'm doing some pre-release code testing. A collection of colleagues from Veritas are doing some additional testing and learning of the capabilities as we speak today. So what I will say is stand by for a future webcast where we'll cover more in depth about how data protection with backups will be enhanced for Kubernetes deployments with Veritas NetBackup. So Amit, yeah, so there were a lot of questions related to backup, but I see questions coming up continuously around containerization and protection as well. And maybe this is one question I might pose to Kunal. There was one question that came up that said that they were aware of the advantages of using containers, but they were also cautious about the cons of using containers. I think a lot of the challenges customers had with containerization was due to persistent data handling. So Kunal, if you could elaborate somewhat more on some of the topics you had regarding containers, persistent data issues, and the reasons why we've innovated some capabilities into the product might help that question with that question.
Right. Thank you, Phil. So that's a great question. In our conversations, like I was talking to this particular telco who wants to containerize a portion of their billing systems, there was a need where a data comes in from the upstream, and then the downstream application needs a real-time access to that data for making some decisions and sending out sales promotions, etc. So there is a real-time need of sharing data among multiple applications which are containerized. So they said they were using a capability from NAS filers where you can mount NFS file systems across containers and you get a read-write capability. But they said anything that is consumed over network, like NFS does, there is a strong performance hit. And then because of these, the applications are not able to perform at their optimum level. They cannot send out real-time sales promotions. They cannot send out real-time customer alerts, etc. And there were also some kind of application hangs. So the problem we are trying to solve is the performance challenge when it comes to persistent data. And we are trying to do it with block storage, right? And block can come either from a SAN attached storage resource or direct attached storage resource. So we take out that element of network latency out of the equation. You get a raw, consistent performance from your storage array, so you can bring more enterprise critical workloads into containers. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Kunal. Amit?
Yep, sounds good. So thank you. I'm just looking at the clock. Maybe we could actually take one more question. I am going to look at some question answers that are still unanswered, and I'm just going to take the latest one. So Kunal, there is one question that says, are there case studies available using InfoScale for EKS or AKS?
Right, thank you. So as of now, what we have done is we have the first platform that we are going to support is OpenShift. And the next one we will be supporting is VMware's Tanzu. So the OpenShift support will be Red Hat certified. And next we'll be working with VMware. There is no reason we cannot use this software for off-premise Kubernetes implementation like EKS or AKS from Amazon. But as of now, we have not qualified as yet. If you have interest, we'll be happy to speak to you. The software is based on open standards, as I said, CSI.
Absolutely, and on the same lines, as long as the application ecosystem is something that you can confidently containerize, and the application ecosystem can function with the public cloud infrastructure, that should be a good starting point, and InfoScale can bring in the value as we've just discussed. So that's cool. There are questions coming in as well, so maybe I'll take one more. Again, the latest question: what is the difference of software being qualified by vendor and using without, a qualification? So Kunal, probably that is the one that you were typing in an answer.
Yeah, thank you, Amit. So the difference really is about the support experience, right? Imagine you are using a software by, let's say, a vendor A or vendor ABC on Red Hat OpenShift, and you face an issue, and then for troubleshooting, the vendor ABC says that we need some information from Red Hat. And then when you go to Red Hat says, we never qualified this software. There is no engineering relationship with this vendor ABC. This will result in a very unpleasant experience for you. So that's the difference. When you have a qualified software product in your environment, both the vendors, one who is providing PaaS services like Red Hat, one who is providing storage services like Veritas, if at all there is an issue in the backend, the engineering teams will collaborate and you will have a pleasant experience. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. So that's exactly what we want to look at. So I think there were a couple of questions that came into the chat window as well. So I'm just going to take one from there. Is the Veritas container Kubernetes solution a subscription base? So from a licensing point of view, Kunal, do you want to just touch base on the licensing here?
Yeah, so licensing is pretty straightforward. It's based on the amount of computing power that you have per node in the cluster.
Perfect. So that's great. So I think we are almost at the top of the hour. I will
Amit, actually, there is one more question which I saw from Kenneth, and I would like to take that.
Sure.
He says, he says, it seems that other storage provider can also do the same things that you mentioned. Can check is there anything that you can do and other vendors cannot do now? Right. So there are vendors, there are two vendors which you are seeing. One is the hardware vendors, which provide some sort of similar capabilities, but their capabilities are tied to their hardware, right? So you have to buy their hardware. There are other capabilities, there are other players which are sort of similar to Veritas in the market. And what Veritas is doing differently from those players is bringing in a proven software solution. So InfoScale is not something new to the market. As I said, the software has proven itself in large financial, telcos, healthcare, and public sector environment. We are bringing in the same IP, same capabilities for now Kubernetes environment. That's number one. Second is it's 100% software defined solution. So you can take your choice of infrastructure, be it SAN attached storage or direct attached storage, and you get the same consistent capabilities. Many vendors do not provide these capabilities. And last but not the least, our plan is to provide more infrastructure support. So if you take your workloads from OpenShift to VMware Tanzu to an off-premises Kubernetes implementation, the open standards on which our solution is based does not lock you down into any particular PaaS solution. So I hope that answers your question.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kunal. All right. So thank you all for joining today. We are almost at the top of the hour now. We will circulate the slides that we've used, as well as the recording will be uploaded on our Veritas community. So, we will have the content accessible. If you have any questions, as I said, please reach out to asr.team@veritas.com, and we'll be happy to get back to you with a meeting or a follow-up discussion. So thank you for joining in today. Appreciate your time. And until next time, stay safe and speak soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.